to the bloated military budget, which drains away all kinds of support for the necessities of the American people back home. They don't talk about the corporate crime wave that even the mainstream press is reporting. Insurance companies, banks, drug companies, oil companies. They don't talk about the huge amount of corporate welfare. You know, they're into poor, the way they go after programs that help the poor. But the corporate welfare kings are making out like bandits with very little congressional oversight. So one area after another. I mean, one would think, for example, 5,000 Americans dying every week from what Johns Hopkins medical report said are, quote, preventable problems in hospitals, end quote. That's 5,000 Americans a week, 250,000 a year. And the doctors who put this report out a few years ago said that nothing is really being done about it by the federal government, and that was their most conservative estimate. $1 billion a day is being ripped off from health care programs by corporate crime, and $60 billion rip-off of Medicare alone. How inflationary is that? I mean, the areas that they avoid because of their paymasters and who they raise money from is really pretty extraordinary. But the real problem, Amy, is that where are the people protesting here? You would think they're about to be cut off from all kinds of critical federal programs with the shutdown on Saturday midnight, and there are no demonstrations in the districts of these dozen or so right-wing Republicans, North Carolina, Arizona, Georgia. And where is the Democratic Party in these districts? They're not challenging these members who are getting a free ride. One guy from Virginia, Congressman Good, just bragged that he only got one call criticizing his threat to shut down the government, and he's getting all kinds of supporting calls against federal spending. Well, that's because there's no Democratic Party activity. They're giving him a free ride. So we're seeing terrible situations here that are not being discussed or debated. And part of it is because Fox News doesn't ask those basic questions at all. They don't ask about the crumbling democracy, the empire all over the world. What are we doing? All over the world, we expect countries to obey our military dictates. And we have bases in over 100 countries. We're wasting trillions of dollars, and there's no question about that.
Let me go to the issue of global politics. During the debate, former Republican governor of South Carolina, the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, went on the offensive, attacking her rival, Vivek Ramaswamy, over his stance on TikTok.
This is infuriating because TikTok is one of the most dangerous social media apps that we could have. And what you've got, I honestly, every time I hear you, I feel a little bit dumber for what you say. Because I can't believe that here you've got a TikTok situation. What they're doing is these 150 million people are on TikTok. That means they can get your contacts, they can get your financial information, they can get your emails, they can get text messages, they can get all of these things.
This is very important for our party.
Exactly what they're doing.
This is very important for our party, and I'm going to say
you've gone and you've helped China make medicines in China, not America. You're now wanting kids to go and get on the social media that's dangerous for all of us. You went and you were in business with the Chinese that gave Hunter Biden $5 million. We can't trust you. We can't trust you. We can't have TikTok in our kids' lives.
This is very important.
Mr. Ramaswamy, you have 15 seconds.
I think, excuse me.
You have 15 seconds, Mr. Ramaswamy.
Thank you. I think we would be better served as a Republican Party if we're not sitting here hurling personal insults and actually have a legitimate debate about policy following Reagan's 11th Amendment in his honor. And the answer is that is what actually makes our country strong. And I believe in these people. These are good people on the stage. They disagree, but let's have a legitimate disagreement.
Someone did tweet something along the lines of, if I could ever find someone to love as much as Nikki Haley hates Vivek Ramaswamy, I'll be a happy man. Ralph Nader, your response.
Well, generally, her criticism of social media and what it does to kids is correct. She's picking out TikTok because it's Chinese-owned, but it could be Facebook, it could be Instagram, it could be any one of these wardens of the internet gulag that's got our kids hooked through that iPhone 5 to 7 hours a day, separating them from their parents, community, nature, you name it. But they're now wrangling with each other. They're trying to break out to see who's going to be number 2 or number 3 in the polls up against Trump. That's what's causing that back and forth. It's really interesting. I mean, you have millions and millions of people who are not making a living wage. They don't even mention that the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, frozen since 2009, and or even earlier. They don't even mention it. They don't mention occupational health and safety. They don't mention that tens of millions of people are without health insurance or underinsured, and that at least 100,000 people, 2,000 a week in this country die because they can't afford health insurance to get diagnosed and treated in time. So, it's just a lot of wrangling back and forth, and a lot of it is the debate format and the kind of questions that are asked.
Were you surprised, Ralph Nader, by the Fox host Varney asking something we played before? Together, the CEOs of General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis made 336 times the number of rank and file workers. That's just part of a wider income inequality trend in the country. This issue of wealth inequality, has it gotten even Fox is addressing it, just too big to ignore? Or that's because, Murdoch has said he's retiring?
Well, it is too big to ignore, but it keeps going on and on. Years ago, Fortune magazine had on its cover, CEO pays out of control and why nothing can be done to stop it. Well, that's because the shareholders, or the owners of these companies, are rendered completely powerless. The hired hands in executive suite have even made the owners of their capitalist corporation powerless. How about that one? Well, Mary Barra makes $29 million a year as CEO of General Motors, $29 million. Now, that is at least on a 40-hour week, over $14,000 an hour. And she's got low-tier workers in the auto industry working for $18, $20, $22 an hour. So that's the kind of gap. You got to reduce it down to the hour. Over $14,000 an hour, hour after hour, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, not counting extraordinary benefits and perks. The CEOs of the big auto companies used to restrain themselves because the auto workers were strong enough as a union not to tolerate it, and they didn't want to give the auto workers an excuse. Now, all limits are gone. And it's very good that the new head of the United Auto Workers, Sean Thain, he is taking them on and calling them out with great specificity. He's talking like an old-time fighting labor leader, and the auto workers ought to be glad that they're finally led by someone who's going to draw the line, because the auto workers have been pushed down for years, especially after the GM bankruptcy and the $30 billion plus federal bailout in 2012 under Obama. The workers have to take all kinds of concessions. So it's not that they're breaking new ground here. They're catching up on past deprivations.
Let me ask you about the issue of covering Trump, right? Trump wasn't there last night. He was in Detroit speaking in a non-union hall, speaking separately from those in Simi Valley at the Ronald Reagan Library. How do you think the media should be covering Trump right now, moving into the 2024 elections now with over 90 indictments, 90 charges against him, and however many cases? The most recent judge that came out against him 2 nights ago could dissolve the Trump organization.
Well, it should cover his criminal activity, his unconstitutional record as president, his serial violation of federal criminal statutes like the Hatch Act, the Anti-Deficiency Act. He used the White House loan for political campaigning, which is a criminal violation. And the press didn't even cover it, except for Joe Davidson of the Washington Post, following our letter to the Justice Department. Now, the New York Times does something that is really extraordinary. They put the quotes of Trump in capital letters when he puts it in capital letters on his website. I mean, how far do you go in trumpeting Trump? And what they should do is apply newsworthy standards. If he says the same thing every day on the hustings, you don't report that every day. Margaret Sullivan, the media critic recently, the Washington Post, is retired. She wrote a long essay telling the media how not to cover Trump, and they still fall for it because of the ratings. He's got them by the finger. And if it continues this way, he's going to benefit from billions of dollars of free publicity. And the more outrageous he is, the more he lies, the more he creates fantasies instead of realities, the more he engages in false promises, the more he tries to cover up his crimes, the more attention he gets.
Let me ask you something, Ralph Nader. Some critics, including Lawrence Tribe, tweeted in June, WTF, does Cornel West really want to help the GOP nominee win the way Ralph Nader helped G.W. Bush defeat Al Gore in 2000? Ego trips can come at a heavy price, Cornel. Please stop this foolishness before you really hurt the things you care about. Can you respond to this, Ralph, as you were brought into it, but then also talk about what you're feeling about President Biden right now?
Well, this is the worst performance by Larry Tribe. He is a leading constitutional law expert. He should know what the First Amendment is all about. When you run for office, you are running in the right of the First Amendment, the right of free speech, a petition, assembly, and he should say, well, I don't like these candidates, and I'm opposing them, but I'm not going to oppose their right to run. I mean, he flew down to he flew down to Florida in 2004 in a court trying to get me off the ballot, which is basically saying, shut up, do not exercise your right of free speech. This is a constitutional law professor at Harvard Law School, my alma mater. Teresa Amato had to go down and oppose him, and she blocked it, our campaign director. So he's got a real tick on third parties. He doesn't understand. The way the Democrats should deal with progressive third parties is to adopt their popular agenda. That's what Harry Truman did to Henry Wallace in 1948. He took some of Henry Wallace's progressive agenda, and Henry Wallace started dropping in the polls. That's what a competitive democracy is all about. Instead, the Democratic Party, with the help of Larry Tribe, is scapegoating. Every time they lose to the worst Republican Party in history, they blame the Greens. And they're just scapegoating. The Democratic Party does not look at itself in the mirror. It's very low on introspection and doesn't ask itself why, against the most corrupt, dictatorial, corporate indentured, you name it, Republican Party, that they're not landsliding them. And if they win, they barely win, and they don't have a workable majority in the Congress. And if they lose to the worst party. I mean, people like Teddy Roosevelt and Eisenhower and Senator Robert Taft, they couldn't believe how bad the Republican Party is. And the Democrats are barely competing.
We have just 30 seconds, Ralph, but I wanted to get your response. You were just profiled in the Washington Post. I think the headline was, was Ralph Nader, wary of Trump offers to help Joe Biden win. Is that accurate?
It's an inaccurate headline, which the reporter has nothing to do with. What I said was that in a choice between Trumpster fascism or Democratic Party autocracy, I'll take autocracy because it allows an opportunity for a reversal. Fascism and the violent rhetoric and behavior and voter suppression of the Trumpsters, and they're just getting underway.